Welcome back to the smoke-filled room. I'm excited, not just because we have a lot to cover, but because we have our whole political team with us this week. Between people's vacations and us being on location in Springfield, we have not had our full team with us for a while, so I'm pumped. We got everybody. We've got Abby, Chris, John, Matt, and Michael all with us today. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We have a packed agenda, so we're going to get right into it. There's a lot happening in Illinois. There's a lot happening nationally. There's a lot happening in the news. We recorded this on Thursday afternoon, and just minutes ago, Tim Mapes was found guilty of perjury and obstruction of justice. As you watch this on Friday or later, or listen to it on Spotify, I'm sure you've already heard this from a number of sources, but we should get into it a little bit because it's obviously big news. As always, we go to Chris when it's a topic of corruption, because he is the king of corruption. So, Chris, tell us what's going on here and why we should care.
So, Tim Mapes, Madigan's former chief of staff, was on trial for perjury and obstruction of justice, and he was found guilty this afternoon in another blow to the old guard of the Illinois Democratic Party and the machine. Recently, the ComEd 4 trial encapsulated the news. They were all found guilty, and Tim Mapes is the next one in line to be found guilty. It's very interesting. I mean, the verdict itself isn't that, surprising, except it kind of is, because the prosecution's case in many of these trials so far has been pretty flimsy. But I think one of the issues that these defendants are running into is that how are you going to convince a jury of people to vote not guilty on a corruption case? I think that's part of the problem here. Even if the defense had a really good case, I don't think they were ever going to get past the jury box. They could appeal this, but who wants to spend money on appeal? So Tim Mapes has been found guilty, and at this point, I think everybody's going to be found guilty.
I mean, the feds aren't messing around, and it's amazing to see the difference between how the federal court system works compared to, let's say, the Illinois court system. I mean, what on paper seems like a decent case, but maybe not necessarily a slam dunk, and a federal court is clearly a slam dunk. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out for Madigan's trial. But Mapes is going to be sentenced on January 10th, but they said that date could change. So we'll hear what Mapes gets sentenced for. The maximum for him is 25 years. He won't get that, but we'll see what the sentence comes down there. This certainly keeps and puts corruption in the news. And as we've talked about in previous weeks, the House Republicans have clearly seen this as a line of attack for them. They were quick to have quotes from the leader and some of their members. So they've pounced on this, and they're looking to get the news on corruption. So this is definitely going to be something we're going to hear about throughout the course of the next election season.
Yeah, I saw Kelly Cassidy's also taking her victory lap about this, which isn't surprising. But it's also
a whole lot of those House Democrats hated Mapes, especially sort of that new wave. So a lot of them are going to be, jumping for joy today.
And the other thing that's interesting about this case as a whole is that Mapes had the opportunity to be granted full immunity in exchange for full cooperation and testimony and everything, and he chose to go forward with this and still lie. So convicted of lying. So he still lied. So that's the really interesting thing here is that even when given a chance of full immunity, not everybody's taking it.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on the trial or on corruption itself?
I just think it's 6 years too late kind of thing. Like a lot of the people that were state reps and state senators that were connected to Madigan and this crew, they're all gone now. They either got beat or retired. So I mean, it is an issue, but we have to be careful to make sure that we don't make it the issue, because there's so many other topics that are affecting Illinoisans on a daily basis that we need to be talking about, like crime in their communities, inflation, the list goes on and on.
Well, and I think there's something to be said here. We talked about, will corruption be a good issue for Republicans roughly 2 episodes ago. People can go back and see we had an in-depth discussion on it. And one thing I felt afterwards that we didn't say is this time between elections is when you can make something into an issue. So I don't have a problem with the House Republicans really hammering home corruption before election season even begins. What I would have a problem with is if corruption doesn't prove to be an issue that's moving votes and they're still using it next September, 6 weeks before election day. Okay, now we got a problem. But during this period, before the election season has even begun, this is when you can try to make things into issues. So if that's what they're doing, then I get it. Now we're kind of jaded because in Illinois politics, we just see that a lot of the people on our side of the aisle aren't smart enough to know the difference between a pre-election strategy and a during election strategy. So forgive us if we're just a little bit jaded on, not thinking that they have the wherewithal to make a transition if a transition needs to be made. We'll see how it plays out. But I don't blame them for trying to make this into an issue because people should care about corruption. As we've talked about in previous episodes, they just don't in this state. But you know what? If you want to try to make them care from now until, let's say, next June, give it a shot. And then let's pull it and then let's see. And if it's not moving votes come next July, you're going to have to pivot. And I have a feeling that we're going to have to pivot. But, if they want to give this a shot and try to make people care about this issue, it's certainly going to be in the news. All right, let's move to the next topic. I know you guys are all itching to move to this next topic. I probably won't have much to say because, frankly, I just hate you all and your love of national politics. But we're recording this on Thursday. Last night was the GOP presidential debate, the first debate. There's a lot of news coming out of it. I know some of you watched it. I think maybe even some of you were there. So I'd like to hear some updates from you all on what happened, what your takeaways were, and hopefully we can find some angles as to why this matters to Illinois. But what did you guys all take out of last night's debate? And I think we probably should start with DeRay.
Well, I think there was a clear winner. We saw that the person who's going to skyrocket in the polls after this, we all know who it is. I won't say his name, but we already all know. I was there yesterday. It was really cool. Just the energy in the room was fantastic. And I think our candidates and candidates that we're working with in Illinois can definitely take a lot of things from just how they message their issues. A lot of the candidates up there, they tried to differentiate themselves. They had their niche target. And a lot of times in Republican primaries, that's what it comes down to. Nikki Haley was obviously playing the female card. Doug Burgum was really trying to do a really niche audience of the small town, rural kind of cowboy kind of target audience. And all of them tried to do that. Some of them did it better than others. But I think if we could learn how to message off of some of these Republican candidates, we'd be in a good spot.
Matt, we have some personality questions. So first, was Doug Burgum able to stand? I know there was, all sorts of concern about how he got hurt in a basketball game and might not be able to stand during the debate.
He was able to stand. I don't know how many people there were able to stand him, but it was kind of funny to see people like DeSantis getting his makeup done when he would go to commercial break. All these people would run up to him and powder him up, and he would do his little hand things. So it was kind of cool.
I mean, were they? It's TV. I'm assuming they were doing that with everyone, or was it just DeSantis?
Certain candidates would walk off stage, like Vivek, he would walk off. So would Doug Burgum. But really the only ones that kind of got their makeup done was DeSantis and Nikki Haley. Chris Christie, I didn't see anyone do his makeup because I don't think it would fix how he looks. Poor guy. No one seemed to give him much attention. But yeah.
I mean, listen, when you're as white as me or maybe a DeSantis, you kind of need that makeup. So I get drowned out on camera if I don't have makeup on. So that's why I look so white on these. Though thanks to Springfield, I got a lot of sunburn last week, so I got a little color now. Anybody else have thoughts on the debate? I know you guys all have thoughts.
I think it was just. Go ahead, Abby.
So I was undecided. I was undecided before this debate. Truly, I've never really been a huge Trump supporter, so I was really looking at this debate to see who was going to distinguish in my mind. First of all, Vivek is like every millennial stereotype put into the world, and like, while he had some good points, like he just did things that I think are just going to make people really, really upset. But begrudgingly, I'm going to be with Team Collin here, and I think Nikki Haley did the best job of distinguishing herself amongst all the people on the debate stage. In my mind, was one more voter. Yay! So I think she's the only one that sounded presidential. Chris doesn't like her policies, and he's giving me a dirty look. But that's my takeaway from things. I mean, Pence versus Vivek debate, that was like not really a thing I saw coming. It was kind of funny.
I heard it was pretty epic, so I didn't watch. I'll give make sure I'm clear about that. But I heard the sort of the old guy versus the millennial was sort of a get off my lawn moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I Collin, I texted you during that debate that your girl is killing it, and I think Nikki Haley was the real winner last night. The stupid fly is going to make me look like Mike Pence here, but. I mean, I think Vivek, I know DeRay loves his Vivek, but I think, Vivek kind of got exposed last night. He got exposed policy. You know, I think Nikki Haley really took him to town on foreign policy. You know, Mike Pence went after him pretty well in the experience. You know, but at the end of the day, Vivek is basically a GOP MAGA focus group candidate built out of a lab. But I thought that, you know, in terms of what the establishment candidates, they really went after him, and I thought they did pretty well. The other thing to note is that nobody really went after Ron DeSantis. And I think that was to his advantage. I mean, his campaign's kind of been struggling recently, and all the attacks were focused on Vivek. And, you know, and I thought DeSantis wasn't the star of the night, but he was able to get his message across. I thought he had some good answers to the questions. And finally, you know, Chris Christie still knows how to debate. I mean, he never advances himself, but boy, does that guy know how to take down others.
And he's an attack dog for sure, and he's a dang good one. I mean, Chris, you were doing exactly what's going on in my head about DeSantis. I mean, I don't know, John. I appreciate your perspective on it. I think DeSantis not being the story out of the debate, the fact that all the candidates ignored him, like if they all called each other beforehand, that was a brilliant strategy. I don't know how they pulled that off, but basically ignoring the guy makes him irrelevant. I mean, I think that might be the final nail in the coffin, to be honest. He needed to come out of that debate looking like a solid alternative to Trump. The fact that everyone was focused on Vivek Ramaswamy, I think I did it right, Matt. Tell me if I did it right. I mean, the fact that they were all focused on him and not really on DeSantis, actually, I think it makes him look bad. He came into this as supposedly 2 months ago as the guy, and now he's not even the topic of the debate. I mean, he's barely the story coming out of it. I think that's a bad thing. Chris, what do you think?
I thought this team was supposed to be a team of political experts. And here we are talking about a debate that has no meaning whatsoever. More people watch Trump on Twitter talking to Tucker Carlson than watch this debate. None of these people are going to move one iota in the polls. Maybe, you know, Vivek loses a point. Maybe he gains one. Who knows? Who cares? Donald Trump is up 50 points in the polls right now. He's up 30 over Ron DeSantis in Florida right now. So who cares what any of these people said, what their policies were, because nobody in the actual Republican electorate cares, because all they're going to do is vote for Trump.
I actually kind of agree with you, Chris. I will say one thing. I think there's a big dichotomy between half the candidates that were there to talk about their policies and what they would actually do if they were president, and the other half that were just there to get clicks and views. I think Pence, Christie, Vivek, they were all obviously there to have their one-liners and to say something flashy and to interrupt, where you had Asa and Doug and Nikki who were actually trying to push forward ideas. And I think we're going to see that the candidates who were trying to be rah-rah and to get their name ID up are actually going to be doing better.
I mean, it's an interesting conversation to be had about politics nowadays, which is we're in the social media generation. Is there really that much value in showing that you're strong on policy chops during a debate, or is the value in having a quote or two that actually gets, you know, it gets tweeted out, that gets retweeted, that gets attention? You know, and then the second part of that is, if Trump already owns that space, is there any value in trying to fight him in a space he already dominates? Or do you go the other route of saying, I'm going to be the establishment sort of more reasonable choice? It's an interesting sort of political philosophy debate. But I think Chris isn't wrong. I mean, we can say winners and losers of the debate all day, but the clear winner was Trump. I mean, no one came out of that debate looking like the clear alternative. And Trump made the right call, which he doesn't always do politically, of not attending. You know, none of these people are showing that they're a clear alternative. So they can all fight to be a VP or all fight to be in second place. But at the end of the day, it only matters who gets first. So it's hard to say anybody won the day other than Trump. And the primary is coming up pretty quickly. I mean, we're recording this in fairly late August. There's not much time for someone else to show that they could be that alternative. Michael, you haven't had a chance to speak yet. You've been giving everyone else a chance.
Yeah, I would just say, first off, it's like it was basically a competition. It's like vice presidential tryouts and cabinet member tryouts. Like, Trump is so high above all of them in the polls. Like, they're just competing to see who can be second. Maybe Vivek gets a little boost out of it and becomes a slightly less distant second, but I don't think it's really going to change much. I agree Trump made the right move by not showing up, and I think we'll get a lot more out of the Tucker interview, especially when it comes to viewership. And I would say, like, when it comes to strategy, like, whenever you've got that many people on one stage, like I saw one where they had a chart showing like how much speaking time each person got. Like maximum was like 10 minutes. And you got to think all of those are like short, like like a minute and a half or 30-second spots. Like you can't really get up there and talk about, oh, this is what I'm going to do when I'm in office. Like I think the strategy when the stage is larger like that is that you've got to have those one-liners and things that are going to get your attention because you're trying to look for a way to stand out. And I think that's why Vivek did so well, is because he came prepared with those. Nikki Haley was just like, hey, we're going to send troops to every country on this planet and like get involved and it's going to be wonderful. And Lockheed Martin is just like, look at all the dollar signs. So I was not a fan of that. And I also did not like how she said, like, vote for me because we're not going to have 60 votes in the Senate and we're not going to be able to do anything on abortion. So we might as well just give up on it. You know, it's like, Nikki, like, come on, we got lives to save here. She's more worried about people in Ukraine than she is about people in the United States, which is a big problem for our party.
It's amazing how much we've become the protectionist party, but I'll leave it at that. So I want to move to one thing that I saw this week that I'll be honest, it scared me and kind of depressed me. So I'm curious if you guys are going to get a different feel from this, but there was a survey taken where they asked of the 62% of Republicans who support Trump, who do they trust and who do they feel what they tell them is true? And of that group, 71% feel that what Trump tells them is true, compared to friends and family at 63%, conservative media figures at 56%, religious leaders at 42%. Let me translate what that means. Basically, of the Trump supporters in the Republican Party, they trust Trump more than they trust their friends and family, more than they trust the media, conservative media, more than they trust their priest or their minister or their pastor. Babylon Bee did a funny thing, which I'll have Lane bring up and post here, which is pretty funny, which is said that Republicans believe Trump is more trustworthy than Jesus, which basically is the point of this, that like Trump supporters are so bought in that literally whatever he says is true, no matter whether it is true or not. And I understand being a fan of your candidate. I get that. But our tribalism has gotten so bad in politics that we now believe our favored presidential candidate, whoever that might be, over friends and family, over our faith leaders. I mean, it's just, I don't know. This kind of depressed me a little bit about the state of our society. Am I crazy? Should I be looking at this differently? Or is it as scary as it seems?
Collin, you're using the wrong word. It's not tribalism. It's a cult. I mean, like it's literally a cult around one man. This isn't like the Republican Party where we have, like a broad set of ideas and like it's okay to disagree. It's no, what Donald Trump says is basically the word. And if you disagree with it, we're going to toss your ass out. Like it's literally a cult of personality surrounded with one human being. And it's really disappointing to see. And I mean, like I could go on a whole rant about it, but we just don't have time for that right now.
Well, I don't know that any of us could go on a Steve McClure level rant. So we're all sort of a little bit below his level at this point.
So to this, I'll speak on two things. Number one, polling since Trump's ascent to political stardom has always indicated that Trump supporters are less religious than other members of the Republican Party. That's how the polling looked in 2016, and that's how polling has looked at just polling of the Republican Party since Trump's taken it over. Republicans are less and less religious than they used to be, and that's kind of a testament to America as a whole. Organized religion in America has declined.
Yeah, but Chris, hold on. I don't want to get lost on a whole thing about religion here. I mean, the point the point isn't about religion. The point is that we trust Trump more than friends and family. Yes, also religion, also conservative media, but we're talking about like people trust Trump more than their spouses. I mean, this is at a different level here.
Well, I mean, it's the quest. It's the human longing for higher authority and all things like that. And that's what this is a part of. People have abandoned religion and they've abandoned the closest of their friends, and they're going back to different personalities like Donald Trump. I mean, it's the same thing with like the left and their, worship of the institution. What the institution says and what the media says, they have a religious zeal for. And that's the same thing for the Republican Party. So you can't take away the downfall of religion from this conversation, because that has a lot to do with this, Collin.
I would also say probably if you polled like liberals and said like Bernie Sanders, do you believe what he says more than like religious leaders?
It's not going to be at this level, man. It's not going to be at this level.
Maybe not.
Listen, the point is, I agree with the point you're making, which is both sides have this problem. But right now, our side has this problem way more than the left does. You can't tell me one figure that the left has put up to such a high regards that whatever they say is true, even if it's not true. That's my problem here, is that we've lost our objective reasoning that if Trump says it, it's automatically true.
I would say like Barack Obama, like 2009. They were just like obsessed. I don't think they would have. They probably would have had.
But here's the thing: you're not going to win me over by saying the left has also done this in the past. It still doesn't make it right. I don't care if other people have done it. It doesn't make it right.
It's not one individual person for the left. It's an entire institution, and that is like corporate media. The experts, all these kinds of things. That the left puts a religious zeal on their quote-unquote higher authorities, that they give more credibility than perhaps their friend, their neighbor, or God. It's the same thing for Republicans. It's Trump. For the left, it's the institutional, like the hierarchy of learning or something like that.
Here's the thing. It's just, to me, the concept is depressing. I don't care about who's at fault. Don't care about the other side does it too. I don't care about that argument. It doesn't work with me. To me, the fact that we've lost as humans the ability to be objective enough to say that when Trump says something true, I can agree with it. But when Trump says something that's not true, I can disagree with it. We've lost that ability to just say, I'm not saying me, I'm just saying that these people, the 62%, that they can't say, I like the guy, but I can also evaluate what he says and think for myself. We've just said, you know what? I'm done thinking. Please think for me. To an entity that, whether you like or don't like Donald Trump, he's a human being. He's a flawed human being, just like the rest of us. None of us should have the power to think for other people.
And that's part of the downfall of religion, because religion is always the fountain of truth in society. As religion goes, man longs for something from some other fountain of truth. And Republicans and Trump supporters have found that fountain of truth in Donald Trump.
I'm glad Chris found a use for his philosophy degree.
Look, we've gone from the party.
It's better than your liberal arts degree.
I got a business degree.
Yeah. No shortage of those, Aaron.
What were we gonna say, John?
I was just gonna say, it's just kind of ironic because we've gone from the party of family values, to the main person in our party, being a guy who's divorced multiple times, and it's just kind of a big shift away from what the traditional values of the Republican Party have been, and
this is part of my point is, when I do trainings and we talk about the different candidates, and everyone in the room agrees, we do that Leesburg grid process where we say, what do you say pro about Trump? What do you say negative about Trump? To get us to think about, how do you run a campaign? How do you evaluate your negatives? Everyone in the room agrees, listen, whether you like or don't like Trump, he's a flawed human. He is a flawed human, more flawed than most. And so everyone agrees in the room. So now we say that that's the person that when he says it, it's true. Okay, but we also say we know that he's human. I don't know. This hit me this week, and it hit me hard this week that the number is that high of people who just have lost their desire or their ability to think objectively in my party or in society in general. And it makes me wonder what the heck we're all doing here. I'll be honest.
Ronald Reagan was the first president to be divorced, John. Just want to remind you of that.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. We're going to get back to Illinois topics now. We've wet our beak. You guys got your chance to talk national and to talk corruption. Let's talk about some Illinois things. There's what I think a really interesting story. Before we dive into the quick hits on Illinois updates, there's a real interesting story coming out of House District 76, and there's a couple reasons for it. So let's talk about the district itself. because there are developments in that district. But then I want to talk about what it means for the Democratic Party as a whole. But let's just go over the updates of what's happening here. So Lance Yednock is the representative there for House District 76. He's announced that he will not be running again. His chief of staff, or whatever her title might be, legislative aide, I'm not sure what her title is, Amy Murray Briel, I may be saying that improperly, has announced she's going to be running for it. On the Republican side, there are at least 2 candidates who are running for it. I know one's name is Patrick Feehan. Chris or John, maybe you know the other candidate's name. I believe it's a female who's a precinct captain there in LaSalle County. But there are 2 Republican candidates who are looking at it. This district is suddenly going to be in play. Yednock was not considered to be someone who was vulnerable in 2024 because he's pretty well known in the district, and he was definitely very moderate and for Democrats, very conservative. Now that he's out, House District 76 very well may be a race that's in play. So let's talk about that, and then we're going to talk about what this means for the Democratic Party, because there's a whole story about that. But just I want to open it up for thoughts on 76.
Yeah, that's a really interesting House district. I've done a lot of work in kind of that area. It goes from, the rivers down in LaSalle County, and it jets all the way up to DeKalb to capture NIU in the city of DeKalb. And that northern portion of the precinct of the district is very progressive in terms of its Democratic primary voters. About 40% of Democrats live in that DeKalb County portion of the district. You have NIU there, and it's just a very progressive Democratic voting base, which is kind of direct opposite of what the LaSalle County portion is. It's a lot of working class, middle class, union members who are involved in the trades. Lance Yednock is a union member. So you have two very competing, voting blocks of the Democratic Party within one district. And now you're going to have to see what happens in this primary. Where does Amy Murray Briel stand? Do the Democrats out of DeKalb County nominate a candidate? Because what makes this race potentially competitive is if the leftward shift we've seen in the Democratic Party continues, and you get a progressive Democrat against a, moderate Republican who focuses on working class, pro-union, that makes it one really interesting race in 2024.
Well, you can definitely see the union impact in these numbers. I mean, I'm just looking at the district, and it's swingy between philosophies. I got to fly too, John, so I don't know what's going on. But it's swingy between, like, if you look at the gubernatorial and presidential elections, it swings between D8 and D15. But the progressive tax went down by 17 points, which makes the baseline for that district closer to break even, more like D2, though I know it's not really D2. But Yednock, being a conservative Democrat who brought all the union support because he's a member of 150, he overperformed that baseline by 13 points. I mean, he made that district not even worth looking at when he was in it. You take him out, and as you said, if you have a Republican candidate who's pro-union, who can get union support, suddenly now that district becomes one that might even be in play, and it especially becomes in play if the Democrats nominate someone who's not mainstream for that district, who's more further left.
I think also an important number to look at is the Workers' Rights Amendment. The Workers' Rights Amendment passed in that district by 18.5%. Huge working class district. Also, you have the nuclear power plants in LaSalle County, which obviously the governor just vetoed that bill. Sue Rezin is a Republican state senator there. So there's a lot of interesting local dynamics that are going to come into place in this specific state house race that I think make it a really unique pickup opportunity for Republicans.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on 76? Chris, we just said the word union a lot. Are you just sitting over there very happy?
Oh, well, I mean, Yednock was going to have problems because he had bucked the Democratic Party on a number of issues related to abortion. Obviously, there's this nuclear power plant bill. He's a very conservative guy. Again, he's a member of 150. You expect something like that out of them. But, I mean, he was staring down the barrel of a primary. He kind of alluded to it in his going away speech that, the Democratic Party, has got to find more conservatives and moderates in it. And, he's gotten some heat for being the conservative in the Democratic caucus. So he was staring down the barrel of a primary, and, his chief of staff or legislative aide, whatever she is, she's probably going to be primary too. And it's going to be a battle between those two parts of the district. And, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And as I said, we're going to talk next about what this means for the Democratic Party. Curious what we're hearing on the Republican side. As I mentioned, 2 candidates are looking at it, or at least very seriously looking at it. I know the one candidate that I mentioned, Patrick Feehan, has officially announced I know there's another candidate, a female who's looking at it as well. And she's got the backing of some people from your region there, Chris. So it looks like there's going to be a bit of a bloody primary on the Republican side as well. I was mentioning Val's behind the female candidate on the Republican side.
Oh, okay.
Well, there may be some more people that express interest now that, this has kind of opened up and there's a new dynamic with Yednock not running. So
yeah, I just know. I mean, Val Ojeda's got a candidate in the district. They're already fighting with the LaSalle County GOP. It's August and they're already screaming at each other. So on the Republican side, that primary doesn't look like it's going to be any cleaner either.
Yeah, and I would definitely expect this primary to grow, especially now that this is going to be an open seat. I would expect somebody out of DeKalb County to get into the race, and we'll see what happens.
All right, let's talk about what this means for the broader Democratic Party, because as Chris alluded to, as he announced that he wasn't running, Yednock talked about the fact that there just wasn't space in the party for his moderate voice anymore. There wasn't space for conservative Democrats. And if you've watched our previous shows or listened to our previous shows, this isn't a new topic, but it has been touched on a few times this week. So the Illinois ran a story where Patrick Finkston interviewed Sherry Bustos, the former congresswoman from Western Illinois, covering a very rural area. And she talked about how this Democratic Party just doesn't represent rural America anymore. And I flagged the story because Brandon Johnson got a number of interviews, the new mayor of Chicago, for his 100 days in office. And he talked about, with the DNC coming into town, how the Democrats across the country need to follow his progressive agenda because his agenda worked. It's why he got elected, when the truth is he underperformed by about 15 points in the city of Chicago running on his agenda. And so you've got a party that is going further and further leftward that the polling results or the election day results don't back. That's the way to go for them to win in some of these areas, and yet they're lurching further and further leftward. And Yednock called it out. He said, "My party doesn't have space in it anymore for people like me." Obviously, as Republicans, that makes us quite happy because as the party goes further left, that creates opportunities for us in a working class moderate state. So I guess my question to you all is, and we'll start with Chris, because I know he'll have thoughts on this. I mean, is there space anymore in the Democratic Party for moderate and rural voices? Yednock seems to think there isn't. Sherry Bustos seems to think that right now there isn't. What do you think?
Right now there isn't. I think there is, or should be at least. That was always part of the Democrats' coalition going back years, was a coalition of ethnic minority voters and working class voters and even rurals. I mean, back in the day, the only reason the Democrats had a shot in the state of Illinois was because downstate, over by Michael Butler, voted deep blue because people down there loved the Democratic Party, and they brought great Democrats to the state house. Congress, Glenn Poshard was a legend. They had those voices, and now they don't anymore because they're being pushed out of the party because we have the Democratic Party now is a party that's all about abortion, and you can't buck abortion. Because if you buck abortion, they want nothing to do with you because that's anathema to the Democratic Party. But it's not just abortion. It's all these issues. It's guns. It's socialism.
Even the environment. I mean, Yednock, you mentioned the nuke bill. I mean, Yednock being for what was a very popular bill, and suddenly now that's not popular amongst the progressive base.
But it also takes people in the Democratic Party who are willing to stand up for some of these issues. I mean, God bless Lance Yednock. He's made some really tough votes for his district on behalf of his district in the past few sessions. But now he's leaving. So what's to say that, how is his chief of staff or legislative aide, how's she going to vote? How's the next person in that seat going to vote? If DeKalb County gets their candidate and it's a progressive, well, they're just going to vote along the party lines, and then Republicans won't beat them because, that's what Republicans are. We just never win for whatever reason. So it's just going to be the same cycle over and over again. The Democratic Party needs people who are actually going to stand on something and actually fight for these issues and not just run every time, the going gets tough. I mean, I mentioned last week on the SFR about poor Mike Zaleski. Mike Zaleski bucks his party on one vote, votes no on parental notification. He's gone, and nobody will ever stand tall again.
Chris, doesn't Lipinski fall in this category too?
Well, I like to branch out a little bit. I can't always talk about my fearless leader. I got to.
But I think that's the point. I mean, we've seen this over the last 6 to 8 years, if not longer, that there really isn't space for anyone in the Democratic Party who is willing to represent their community over the desires of the far left progressives. And even if those progressives aren't in the district, that district is not far left. Yednock was representing his district, and still that it just wasn't good enough for the party.
Oh yeah, now
Matt,
you're
you wanted to
see-
jump in. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, Democrats are giving Republicans a giant gift, a huge gift with a giant bow on it, and the gift is colored purple. It is all the voters who are in the middle. And the Democrats are going way far to the left, and there's just everyday people who they don't know if they're Democrat or they don't know if they're Republican. They traditionally voted Democrat because their parents did or because whatever. Republicans' response needs to be, yes, there is room for you in the Republican Party. Please come to us because we will align, even if we don't align with you 100% on the issues, we align with you more than the Democrats. And so long, Republicans have been saying, no, get out, you're a rhino, or we don't want you, or you don't align with us. But as the Democrat Party goes further and further to the left and is alienating these voters, it's not that the Republican Party needs to go further to the left too. They just need to let more people in. And that's the secret to winning elections, especially in a place like Illinois.
Well, I think we've seen that all over the state of Illinois. When you get out of those collar counties and you look in southern Illinois and western Illinois, kind of up where Jonathan is, a lot of these more rural areas, we're flipping a lot of seats, and that's a result of the Democrat Party going so far to the left. And I think you see that nationwide as well. When I was with G.T. Thompson, who's chairman of the Ag Committee, or the chairman of the Ag Committee in Congress yesterday, and he said that 92% of rural districts in the United States are represented by Republicans. So you see that everywhere. We just have to keep capitalizing on it, and I think we've got some more opportunities in the near future to do that.
Well, so you guys both made separate points here, which is capitalize on rural areas, take districts like House District 76, take them and run up our numbers. But to the point of what Matt was making, which is that's not going to be enough to get to a majority. So we need to capitalize in those rural districts, but we also need to capitalize in these other districts where the everyday working class people of Illinois, or pick your state, are not being represented by these leftist policies.
Right. And I think to Matt's point, if we're going to gain ground in the suburbs, we have to take advantage of those types of opportunities. Like for example, I know we've already talked about this recorder's race in DuPage so much, but the sole reason that Liz Chaplin is primarying the incumbent is that Liz Chaplin is a part of the progressive faction on the county board that doesn't agree with a group of more conservative Democrats in DuPage County. So if we can take advantage of this infighting and message this to independent voters, I think it's a real great opportunity to gain some ground in the suburbs where we're really hurting. So,
well, especially if we keep running people who have experience representing the community.
yes.
I mean, one of the things I love about candidates who have served in local office, who've been a local mayor or someone who's actually been in local service, is they've represented the people. And so you can run as someone who says, listen, I don't care about those partisan politics. I don't care about these progressive agendas, far left, even far right. I don't care about any of it. I'm here to represent you. You know, we've talked about it for a long time that the Republicans who succeed are those governing leaders who represent the people. That's always been the strength of the Republican Party, at least until recently. And if we get back to that, I do think we can start to win a significant number of seats.
Yeah,
I agree.
And on Michael's point about kind of downstate Illinois, you know, I think that I know there's a lot of focus on the suburbs because that's where people live. That's a path to a majority. But, you know, I think in a more realistic world in 2024, you know, Republicans' battleground and opportunities is everything outside the collar counties. You have House District 68, Sharon Jung's seat in 91, Dave Kaler's Senate seat, you know, defending 104. There's a lot of really good pickup opportunities outside the collar counties where, you know, we're not talking about it because it's not sexy and it's not in DuPage County when, you know, House District 68, we had 2 statewide Republicans win that this cycle. And it's a prime pickup opportunity that we need to be putting more attention on as a party if we really want to start to get out of the supermajority.
Well, and it's not just,
and let's be honest, you just want to knock off Dave Vella too. So there's that personal feeling, right?
well, it's 100% that. Like there are some really solid pickup opportunities, you know, outside of those collar county areas, but then also like looking to like 2026 when we have these statewide, there's a real opportunity to run the numbers up in a lot of these counties. And, you know, if you get, you know, 10,000 votes here, 20,000 votes there, that could really make the difference on a statewide race.
But
And
the key's both. I mean, right?
because
Because we saw that with Bailey. He did run up the score in those red areas, and it led to a 2 or 3 point bump in the polls. The problem is what he gained there, he lost out of the suburbs, and it ended up being a bit of a wash. So the key will be finding someone who's a good enough communicator who can do both. Can you run up the score in the red areas and still do well in those more suburban areas? That's the key. Because lately we've just been trading. We either pick a candidate who does well here and poorly there, or one who does well here and poorly there. We're just constantly trading votes back and forth and losing by the same margin every election. What we need now is someone who can actually add instead of constantly focusing on subtracting. All right, we've got some time left, but we've got like 10 different Illinois campaign updates to get to. So let's see if we can actually do quick hits for once and get through some of these. But we got to talk about IL-12 because we always talk about IL-12. We'll start with you, Michael. I got to start here. I'm just curious, how much feedback have you gotten since Steve McClure's lit the world on fire last week? Because I mean, I know poor Rhonda got some feedback that she should have stopped him. If you were in the room, you would know there was no stopping Steve. I mean, he was like a freight train. It was pretty epic. I'm a little jealous that I haven't gone on that kind of a rant. So don't blame Rhonda for it. But I'm just curious. I know you've got a little feedback from the comments that were made last week. What are you hearing about IL-12 right now?
Specific to last week, I really only got like 2 negative comments from people, and I got a lot of positive, a lot of, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm glad he said it, like those kind of things. So it was probably, 90-10 positive. I know that Steve got some feedback, Rhonda got some feedback, but that's to be expected. Last week, we already talked about this a little bit, that McCarthy was here this week. GT Thompson, who is chairman of the ag committee, was in district, and they did some official events and campaign events together. I think between the fundraiser last week and the fundraiser that they had yesterday, they raised 6 figures between those two. I don't really have concrete numbers, but a lot of money was raised between those 2 events. Mike did a really good job yesterday of just kind of running up the score on the ag side of things. He's on that committee. It's unprecedented that somebody is on both the ag committee and the VA committee. He had to get a special waiver so he could stay on there. And they had really good turnout at all their events yesterday. And a lot of like key players in the farm industry, including Farm Bureau president, was at one of the events for the
what do you see on the just to make sure we're giving balance? What do you see on the Bailey side? What are they doing in their campaign over the last week?
Bailey, Darren's been out there and going to events, going to a lot of county fairs and those kind of things, and just shaking hands and meeting people. So he's been out on the campaign trail a lot.
So it looks like the key difference is fundraising, possibly. I mean, we're going to know this quarter's almost 2/3 done. So, yeah. It's really going to come down to on October 15th or whatever the date is that those FEC reports are public, who was actually able to raise some money. It's interesting to see that Bost has all these high-profile fundraisers. Forget the fact that the establishment's coming in for him for a second. He's hosting fundraisers, big fundraisers that bring in checks. I don't see a lot of that out of the Bailey camp in terms of hosting big events, hosting big fundraisers. Am I missing something?
No, I haven't really even seen fundraisers on the books or being promoted. Obviously they're doing small dollar stuff, email, they're doing some text messages and those kind of things. And I'm sure that he's, calling people and asking for money. But you don't see that same like concerted effort like you do from the Bost campaign. So we'll see.
It'll be interesting to see what those fundraising reports show. All right, let's keep moving along. We did not get to talk about this last week, even though it actually was decently big news last week. So let's talk about it this week. In House District 88, we have talked about how Calkins was retiring. Reagan Deering had announced that she was running and has been running for a while. Dan Brady was looking at it, but decided not to run for it. And now we see that Chuck Erickson has announced that he's running for that district. So there will be a Republican primary in 88. Curious who has thoughts on that. I know at the fair, Reagan Deering had a massive presence. They were putting stickers on everybody. People were wearing shirts. They probably had 20 or 30 of their supporters there. I saw Chuck was there as well. He had 1 or 2 supporters with him who were wearing shirts, but they didn't really do a lot to like make a lot of noise at the fair. So if you just took what you saw at the fair, you'd say that Reagan is doing really, really well. But in terms of campaign dynamics, Erickson's got a good amount of support, especially on the McLean County side. he's certainly a candidate to be taken seriously. So it looks like that's going to be a pretty serious primary. Anybody have thoughts on that race? I think, John, you probably got some thoughts on the race.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the state fair isn't going to decide who wins that primary. And Chuck Erickson's got a couple big advantage work for him, I think, right now. One, he's from McLean County. 50% of that district is McLean County. Two, he's got endorsements from Dan Brady and Bill Brady. Those are really big names in that area. One was a senator, one, Dan's been a state representative for a very long time. That support is going to carry a lot of weight in the McLean County area. And also, I think, to Chuck's benefit is that he's running, I think, to the right of Regan, it appears right now. And that's a pretty conservative district. Republican primary voters are going to be more conservative. So, Chuck's running to the right. He's got some good local support, and he's going to have a really good population base. And if Regan's going to want to win, she's going to have to start making inroads in McLean County. She will not win this race, just with votes out of Decatur and Macon County. She's going to have to start, campaigning a lot in McLean and starts building inroads in that part of the district.
It's interesting. I'm sure Michael will have some thoughts, but it's interesting. I hear a lot from people that Reagan has a lot of potential, which, I mean, having seen her at the fair, she does seem likable, and being young and being female and having a good story is a great thing. People talk about how she has money and that she could use that. And I always said the answer is she could, but she didn't do it in her last race. The question is, will she do it in this race? We're going to find out. But what I found really interesting at the fair was that she was hanging around a lot of the party types, the sort of party staffers, the central committee leaders. She definitely don't misread what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the party's taking sides here, just that she seems to have a lot of friendships with more of that, I'm going to use the term, I hate it, but that establishment sort of Republican crowd. She definitely seems to have a lot of friendships in that world. I'd imagine that's going to be big for her and be a big benefit for her in the campaign. It should lead to a lot of support. So I think you have to look at the race as Reagan being a bit of a front runner, but who knows? Michael, what are you hearing?
I think that, she had a really strong start, she's raised, I know at least 70, I know at one point she had raised 77,000. I don't know how much she's raised since then. I haven't seen numbers or heard numbers recently. She kind of got some endorsements like right out the gate. Obviously, Dan Brady chose to endorse Chuck. So that's a dynamic for sure. To your point about the establishment stuff, I think this is not going to break down along those typical lines where it's like establishment and non-establishment. You see that, the former McLean County chairwoman, Connie Beard, she endorsed Regan. You've got Dan Calkins that's supporting him. And to your point, some of the people that she was hanging around at the state fair are also kind of from that establishment wing. So I think it's going to be a race to watch for sure, and it really could go either way. And I think either of them would be great representatives. Like it's almost like you can't really go wrong, which is a good problem to have.
I mean, that's the good news, is that the winner of the primary will be the representative. There won't be a real race in the general. So that's the good news. And it's also been, I'm curious what you have, if you have any insights into the DeVore angle, because obviously we haven't talked a lot about the lawsuits in Illinois regarding the Second Amendment and the assault weapons ban and all that. But there's a big fight between Calkins and the DeVore crew. And that's probably going to spill over into this race. It's been talked about this week by some politicos that it's going to spill over into this race. And, in some cases, having Calkins support might not be a huge benefit for Deering. And if DeVore lines up with Chuck Erickson, that might have an impact.
Well, and I think you're right. And I think this race may kind of end up being a little bit of a barometer of, what pull does each person have?
Well, keep an eye on the race. We'll be very curious to hear what's going on there. So keep a close eye on it. Chris, this is on the Democratic side, so let's just be brief and give the update itself. But I know there was an appointment in Senate District 5 that we haven't had a chance to talk about, right?
Correct. This was the Van Pelt vacancy that was filled last week, I believe it was. Lakesia Collins got the appointment over Omar Williams. She made a coalition with Jason Irvin, whose wife may or may not be running for Congress. We'll see how that goes out. She had a coalition with Irvin, Sideshow Lopez in the 25th Ward, and I believe Moog was the other one. She made a coalition to get her appointed. Anyway, now they have to appoint to get her House seat filled. So probably the same problem's going to happen there. So we'll see what happens.
We'll keep an eye on it. I know, Matt, up in your region, the first official candidate has announced for Lake County State's Attorney. We've talked about how that's going to be a huge race. Taking out Eric Reinhardt in Lake County. Mary Cole announced her candidacy. People have known she's running for a while, but she made it official last week. So what are you hearing about that race, and what are you hearing out of Lake County?
Yeah, last Tuesday, I know we were in Springfield last week, so now we can talk about it even though it was a week ago. She announced in Waukegan, which is kind of by the courthouse, but interesting location just because it's kind of out of the way for some western parts of the county. But she had a bunch of people outside. She had some notable people. It was interesting that she invited as special guests Mark Kirk and Bob Dole. Interesting. And the main theme that she's running on is that Reinhardt has turned the state's attorney's office into a political playground for an extreme agenda. So we'll see how that plays. She has some strengths, energetic, young, but also in some conservative circles, there have been some concerns brought up that she has to address of her recent voting Democrat record, or also that she hasn't been an attorney for all that long compared to someone like Reinhardt. So like every candidate, strengths and weaknesses, but as time goes on, they'll see how she addresses these and how the campaign addresses to attacks from the Democrat side. And there's rumblings that there might be more candidates out there, but so far no names have officially announced.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, it's not surprising that Kirk and Dole were there, considering the race is being run by former staffer for both of those. So that wasn't a huge surprise. But I think strategically, they're kind of already running in a general election. And the question is, will they have a primary? I mean, everyone I hear from Lake County says that Mary Cole would make a great general election candidate. Young, has some minority background. I don't know what percentage, but obviously she's dynamic. She's likable. If you watch the video, I mean, she's a likable person. But as you mentioned, her only voting history in primaries has been Democrat for the last, I think, 6 to 8 years. And in a Republican primary, that's problematic. And there are a number of conservatives who have been talking about that the last couple of weeks and are very concerned. So we'll see if the strategy plays out. I mean, it seems like they're already angling for the general. You put Mark Kirk and Bob Dole up there to say, hey, look, these are reasonable Republicans. That's what I'd be. I'd be just like them. So I get the strategy, and it works great in a general. You just got to make it to a general. So the question will be, does somebody pop up in that primary? We're going to have to wait and see what happens. But certainly that's going to be a big race in Lake County and in Northern Illinois. So we're going to be watching it very closely. All right, next, Abby, I know you mentioned that in House District 81, there's a new candidate who's announced.
Yeah, so Laura Hois, she actually ran in 2020 for the seat. She's definitely more conservative, I would say, been a real election integrity vocal about that. We'll see how she plays out, but I think this is, we've always struggled to recruit candidates in this area of DuPage, which is primarily the Downers Grove area. And I don't know that Laura is going to have that mass appeal to Downers Grove residents. It is a very more conservative area, but like I wouldn't say it's it's not more like on the farther to the right.
No, and let's clarify. When you say more
road.
conservative, you just mean more conservative than Naperville. You don't mean more conservative in general.
Sir, I spent so much time in Naperville, my brain's all mushy.
Yeah, I mean, but it's just to make sure I make the point, because I get what you're saying. You're talking about how it votes blue. I mean, this is a D district for sure.
Yeah.
But it's not like a D district like Naperville is, where Naperville votes Democrat because it's far left. Downers Grove does also vote Democrat, but when you look at the numbers and you really drill down, it isn't as progressive as a Naperville is. But to your point, we need a candidate who can sort of play into that.
Yeah, if we can find a strong candidate who's tied into the community, local business owner or something like that, I think they could do really, really well in this district. Unfortunately, they haven't quite popped up yet, so I'm sure there'll be more to come in that regard.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on it. Michael, what's going on in Madison County? I hear the treasurer is challenging the chairman.
Yeah, so Kurt Prenzler, he's the county chairman for Madison County Republican. He was first elected in 2016. So he is running for his third term. And the incumbent Republican treasurer is primarying him. So it's going to setting up to be, it'll be a very dynamic race and definitely a big one to watch here in the Metro East. The current chairman's tenure has kind of been tumultuous. There's been some issues with some of the employees and some lawsuits and things like that, and a lot of dissension kind of within the county board, even though they have a very strong Republican majority. So I think people are looking for a change in direction, and we'll see if the voters agree with that. But it's going to be a very interesting race, that's for sure.
I mean, it's, obviously in a place where we're finally making gains like Madison County and that whole region, you don't necessarily want to have a bloody primary. You don't want to waste too many resources. On the flip side, sometimes primaries aren't the worst thing. We got to scrimmage before we can fight the other side. So you falling on that second half of it, is that this isn't the worst thing to have this primary, as long as we get it done and out of the way before we focus on the real game in April.
Or in November, but yeah, I think
But
so.
I mean, starting in April all the way
Yeah.
through November. Get through this in March, and then in April we focus on the real game. Like, is that your focus on this?
Yeah, I mean, my guess is that the Democrats probably won't even run a candidate because they have kind of just given up on Madison County. Their coroner's retiring and they're not even running anybody. And that's the last Democrat left.
Oh, I wish we were like that up here.
One day.
One day.
All right, let's keep moving. Senate District 53. So we've talked about this district a little bit in the past, but now we've got a few candidates who put their names out there. This is going to be an open seat because the incumbent is not running, which was Tom Bennett. And so we've got multiple Republican candidates putting their names out there. As if you've watched previous SFRs, 53 is extremely Republican. Our numbers say R37. So no Democrats going to win this district. The winner will be the Republican primary winner. And previously, Paul Ducat had announced that he's running. And now recently, Chris Balkema from the Grundy County side has mentioned that he's now looking at it and running. I've heard 3 or 4 other names that are also looking at it. So this one might not be just a 2-person race. Anybody hearing anything about Senate District 53? It's kind of early, but names are already starting to surface here.
Yeah, I think, Collin, it goes back to something we talked about in some previous SFRs. This race is going to become very geographical. A Grundy County candidate, but that district goes all the way down to the Champaign area. I think it's just too early to give an analysis of the race. I mean, like you said, there's 3 to 4 other names who could pop up. We really got to see what this field looks like before, we can really kind of start talking about who's going to be in a stronger position than others. But, getting your name out there early is always a good thing. Start raising money, attending more events, and just getting to know and letting voters get to know you before other candidates get in the race. Yeah,
I mean, Balkema's got great levels of support in Grundy County. Ducat's got a lot of background, a lot of history in Iroquois County. So this definitely could become a very regional race, a geographical race. We'll have to see who pops up. Full disclosure, I know Chris and Jill. Jill's Chris's wife. We've known them. My wife and I have known them for a long time. So certainly, personally wish him the best. Obviously, you guys have seen, as you've watched this, we're able to be very objective in our smoke-filled rooms, so we'll continue to do so as we analyze that and every other race. All right, let's keep moving around the list here. Abby, let's go back to you. I know that the Democratic Party has a new level of infighting there as they try to rid themselves of one of their township chairmen. What's going on there?
Yeah, so I know maybe we've mentioned, I don't know if we've mentioned it on smoke-filled rooms, but I know we've mentioned it in our previous calls. So I've been hearing for quite a long time that there's been tons of drama in Lisle Township on the government side and on the political side for the Democrats. So the source of that is Diane Hewitt. She's the Democrat chair, and she's the township supervisor. So apparently in her official capacity, she's been a lot of accusations of misappropriating funds, spending them without board approval and sending them to, typical Democrat stuff. But I think it's really gotten to a bad level, and to the point where the Democrats are calling for her removal from the township organization as well from the board. So this has become a united front. But the Democrat Party actually did put out a press release with all their county leadership telling her that she needs to be out of this office. But it sounds like she's going to stay and it's going to continue. And I think every county has that township that you're like, geez, them again. Like, and I think this is very much that township for the Democrats, where it's just always a constant source of drama and infighting. And I'm not quite sure that there's going to be any resolution until if she's voted out of office in 25. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, listen, every county has that. Every family has the family member where you're like, yeah, we don't actually. We don't take responsibility for them. They kind of, it's kind of like, hey, listen, like your fiance, right? He's the family member, the black sheep of the family that no one ever wants to take responsibility for. I'm just kidding. We love Connor.
And if you don't know who it is, then there's a good chance that it's probably
you. Yeah. I think DeRay says that from experience, it seems.
There's no one that I would know in my family.
So it's clearly Matt. All right, we're speeding towards the end. We're at about an hour. Two quick things. So one, I just want to bring this up because it continues this trend of the media and the public giving Pritzker and the Democrats a complete free pass. So if you've watched the news in the last week, you've probably heard that Illinois hit record numbers of job levels in the state of Illinois. We hit a record number of jobs in the state. That was the story you heard. But here's the actual story. Illinois has the 5th highest unemployment in the entire country of any state. If you add DC, it's the 6th, but DC not being a state, it's the 5th worst state on unemployment in the entire country. We just hit the record when the whole rest of the country a year ago hit a record. So the story should be, we're lagging the rest of the country by an entire year. And yet the story really is, wow, way to go, Pritzker and Democrats. We just hit a record number of jobs. It's so frustrating because, listen, I'm not asking the media or the public to be Republican. I get it that we're in a blue state, but maybe, just maybe, pretend like you're going to hold our leaders accountable. And it just seems like week after week, there are examples of that just not happening. So I don't have anything new here other than to say it's yet another example of what is Collin's biggest frustration in life. Does anyone have anything to add, or are you all just sick of me ranting about this?
Democrats always get graded on a curve, and then Republicans, we just, whatever grade we get is what we get.
I mean, Illinois is so bad. Like during the Republican debate last night, they mentioned us like 4 or 5 times. They're like, let's think about states that are truly screwed up, and every single candidate just kept coming to us. So it's frustrating that we can't do better and we choose not to hold our leaders accountable for our problems. So.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I mean, all of us sort of have that experience in life where you learn from someone like how not to do things. Like, okay, great. I'm just going to do the opposite of whatever they do. And maybe that's the example we're able to set for the whole country, is just be that state, and that the city of Chicago could be that city of just like, hey, just do everything the opposite of this and you'll be doing just fine. Even though Pritzker will tell you that he should be in charge of setting policy on abortion and every other issue for the whole country, because he's of the belief that his policies are exactly the policies of the whole country, which is why I wish the dude would run for president. So maybe he could be in for the eye-opening of his life.
Man, he can't even control his own party. I don't know what he's thinking about in that regard, but.
Colin, the problem with your logic here is I would assume the Republicans would run a competent campaign against the presidential candidate Pritzker.
Yeah, well, I'm a dreamer. Let me dream. Chris, let's both commiserate in our final topic here and just be depressed together, because we got to talk about the White Sox. Not only because there are sports developments, but there are also state of Illinois developments here with the White Sox. So we're going to close talking about the White Sox and how depressing they are. And please, the rest of you, be nice, because Chris and I are on a little bit of delicate ground here. But so on the sports developments, the White Sox finally got rid of Kenny Williams. We had to lose Rick Hahn in the process because, it's just politics and whatever. But we finally can bring in maybe some new perspectives. But then the White Sox immediately followed it up with news that they've brought back Tony La Russa to help with the search, and that we're likely to hire from within. It'll probably be Chris Getz and maybe yet another loser from Kansas City who couldn't build a winner in Kansas City. So we did something good, and then immediately followed it up with, no, Jerry hasn't changed at all. He's still going to just hire somebody he knows instead of somebody who actually knows what the heck they're doing. So there was that. And then Jerry put out, and the White Sox put out, that they're potentially thinking about leaving Illinois because their lease is up in 6 years at what I'm just going to call Comiskey Park, because I'm not going to call it anything else. And so they're exploring other options. And what drives me crazy as a White Sox fan is, this whole thing is to create leverage. And Jerry even has talked about it in the past. He's the master at creating leverage. But as one of the most loyal Sox fans on the planet, I can tell you that this creates no leverage, because Naperville doesn't want the Sox right now. No one wants the White Sox right now. They're not a real franchise. They're not a winning franchise. They can't attract fans to the stadium. Who's going to give massive tax giveaways to a franchise that's profitable but can't bring fans into the stadium and drive profit to the local community? Who's going to do that? There's no leverage here. My franchise is a joke, and they're proving it day after day after day. And I don't understand why I'm even a fan of this dang team anymore. Chris, what do you got?
So, point of clarification on something. So, Tony La Russa was already back. They announced before the season he had entered into a consulting role. They just said it again, and everybody got mad about it for some reason. I'm not defending the move. I'm just saying that this has been around for a while. I don't know what.
Appreciate the clarification. Appreciate that.
In addition, the Alderwoman Nicole Lee of the 11th Ward, she's pledged that they're going to take every step necessary to keep the White Sox in Bridgeport. And I'm certainly thankful to her for that, because Lord knows if this team moves to Charlotte or something, then it's going to be the final straw, because you're right, Collin. Who the hell wants this terrible ball club, and where can you move them? I mean, if the White Sox move to Naperville, it just takes all the fun away from being a White Sox fan, because who the hell wants to go to Naperville for anything, let alone watch a baseball game?
You got to say it right. It's Naper Thrill. You got to say it right.
I'm never calling Naperville that ever again. Please never speak those words, Collin. But who wants to go to Naperville to watch a Sox game? I don't know where they're going to put it. Maybe, I don't know. The state just sold the Tinley Park Mental Asylum property to the Park District for $1. Who knows? Maybe there's a redemption arc here, and maybe we'll put the White Sox Stadium in Tinley Park. Probably not. They're just going to put a swing set there and then build low-income housing on it.
So, but Chris, here's the thing. So this would continue the Chicago White Sox trend of just not thinking past their noses, because when Guaranteed Rate, they gave Guaranteed Rate the naming rights of the stadium and made it Guaranteed Rate Field, you just opened yourself up to all these jokes. Now the logo is a downward facing arrow, and the jokes are wide open on where interest is at an all-time low. I mean, this is a team that has shown they don't have the chops to think beyond their noses. So it makes perfect sense that they would open up on the site of a former mental health center. That just makes perfect sense to what this franchise would do.
Well, and there's a million other reasons this franchise is run by idiots. We had Jake Berger. The guy's last name was a tasty sandwich, and they never did anything with the last name.
Nothing.
They trade the guy to Miami. The first thing they do is they're like, hey, Jake Berger hits a home run. Burger King Whoppers for everybody. And he's like going off. He's hitting like 370 right now. But we can't do anything. The Cubs, they build up Yuppieville up there in Boys Town or Wrigleyville, whatever it is, and they got all the nice bars. They got the sports book going in there. And Bridgeport, I love dive bars as much as the next guy. I'll go sit with the old Irish cops at Cork and Carries until the cows come home. But if you actually want to build up the neighborhood a little bit, you got to put some nice things there. It's just a bunch of parking lots and 35th Street dogs. That's all you got going there. So, okay, Jerry, I pray to God, people wanted Jerry to sell the team. I didn't, because I knew damn well Jerry's going to sell the team to some jamoke who's going to move the team to Charlotte or Nashville, not keep the team in Chicago. And now Jerry's going to move the team, or maybe he's not. I don't know. So basically, I'm surrounded by idiots. Once again, I'm in the Republican Party surrounded by idiots. I'm in a Sox fan surrounded by idiots at my baseball team.
Listen, let's talk about Bridgeport. I mean, once Jimbo's closed, there was nothing worth going to around Sox Park. So, I mean, that was part of the problem there. But let's talk about the White Sox and what they have to offer here. I mean, when the local alderwoman said, we'll do anything it takes to keep the Sox, here's the problem. This isn't like the Bears, where everyone agrees they need to do something different. That stadium does not work. Everyone agrees it's problematic. So do they stay in Chicago? Do they go to Arlington Heights or somewhere else? Who knows? We're talking about that. We're figuring that out. But the stadium isn't working. White Sox Stadium, that park is actually, they put millions and millions of dollars into it. It's actually fairly nice. They don't need a new stadium. The stadium's actually okay. And the other problem with this is if you decide you want to move, what fan base is going to go with you? Great. People are talking about putting them up here at Arlington Park next to the Bears. That's great. But I'm one of the few White Sox fans up here. This is a South Side dominated team. You can't move them out to Naperville in the western suburbs. You can't move them to Arlington Heights in the northwestern suburbs. Their fandom is South Side, Southwest Side. So when you move them out of that region, there's no White Sox fans in Nashville, Tennessee, or at least there aren't very many of them. So there isn't a solution here. Like if you're trying to create leverage, what leverage do you have? You have a bad team with a bad market, with clearly bad staff, a bad product. You have a fine stadium. You don't need to change it. And all your fans live right there. You have no leverage.
You could have just replaced that last sentence you said with the Illinois Republicans, and it would have been the same exact thing.
Listen, I'm depressed enough about sports. Don't depress me about politics too. John, I know the Cubs were mentioned and you took that personally. So what's your problem?
I don't have a problem. I'll just, say that if they were to leave to go to Nashville, Chris would have another reason to, take a vacation, and go hit up some bars in Nashville. He'd have a great time down there.
I could see Chris in cowboy boots pretending like he likes country music.
Nashville is hell on earth. All it is a place where, college kids and post-college kids go for the weekend to get drunk for way
Forget
too
the
much
bachelor
money.
Parties.
So, yeah, what was that, Oliver?
It said, don't forget the bachelorette parties. They're feeling
Oh, yeah, the
left out.
bachelorette parties. Nashville is hell on earth. I think I might rather spend time in Wrigleyville than I might want to spend time in Nashville. But again, if the White Sox move, I'm not going to be a fan of this stupid team anymore because the only reason I'm a fan of them is because they're at 35th and Shield, and my family's been watching them since they came over here on a boat. Okay, so I'm going to probably become a Brewers fan, but the Brewers might move too because Lord knows that's not going any more better in Wisconsin. So I'm going to have to join Butler, be a Cardinals fan or something at that point because I'll be damned. I'll be in the cold, cold ground before I ever go to Wrigley Field and root for the Cubs.
You heard it here first. I like it. I feel like it's a good place to stop. Appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you for watching. Thanks especially to my political team. I do alphabetical order at the top, starting with A. Let's see if I can do this backwards this time. Try to keep it fair. So Michael, Matt, John, Chris, Abby. I'm impressed with myself that I could do that backwards. Thank you guys for all your insights. Thank you to Lane Davis, our producer. Especially thanks to last week. The poor guy had to work late at night. Chris drove him home from Springfield. He's pounding away at the laptop trying to get the smoke-filled room up in time for Friday morning. So thank you to Lane Davis for putting in all the hard work. I'm Collin Corbett. Come back next week because we got through, let's see. Yeah, like half our agenda. So we got way more to talk about. We'll catch you next week.